Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm actually feeling really at home here. This is my home. This is where I work. And it's strange sometimes to be here because usually I invite people to do what I'm about to do, which is to speak and tell you about their work. So I'm actually quite privileged that I can be in my own space and tell you a little bit about what we do here. It's interesting. We always talk about immersion and immersive, and we think of it, and we'd like to sort of take that sound immersive, that word immersive a little bit towards our expertise in sound, because you are in an immersive, in a 3D space. Paul already pointed to you that you're likely to drop your mobile phones and your keys, but also you have, very importantly, you have loudspeakers down below. So that already puts you in the middle. You're almost suspended, I would say, in a 3D sound space. You will hear the space because we're going to play some sounds. I have some videos and some sounds. I know Matilda's lined up, I think I'm right in saying, a piece which uses all the speakers. There's a couple of levels, so you have level speakers at the top, medium sort of height where your ears are. This is where you can see sound, where you can see speakers, and from below. So we call it the IMAX of the ear. You're basically sitting in an immersive 3D space already. So we have worked with sound and immersion for many years. This building was opened 15 years ago. And thank you to Paul, who's asked me to give you a real kind of quick overview of some of the immersive and participatory research projects going on. These are not all my projects. I'm also really interested. My role here in Queen's is to be kind of engaging with communities. I have this really fancy title called Impact and Engaged Research Champion, but it really just means that I'm trying to really make these meaningful links with communities. And I've worked very closely with a charity that works with disabled musicians. I will talk a little bit about this too. This term, participatory, well, it's a bit of a mouthful anyway, but sometimes we academics are very good at using fancy words and saying something quite simple, which is really working with communities and working with people. But the important thing about participatory projects is really that everything we generate, all the artistic projects, comes from the stories of people. So it's a real bottom-up concept. It's not just about us going out and working with disabled musicians saying, here's a piece of music, I want you to play that. Everything we generate comes from the communities. I think that's the sort of main thing to take away. So I want to talk you through a couple of projects, and some of the work goes back even further than this, but one of the first sound and conflict research pieces we did, and this was led by Professor Pedro Rubello, who's also based here at SAC, a project called Sounds of the City, working with cross-community, working with a Protestant and a Catholic community here in Belfast, and again, teasing out the sort of their stories about how they grew up in these different communities. And we basically equip people with sound recording equipment. You can see some of these sort of postcards which were generated as part of an exhibition which was shown in the MAC. It was a sound piece, a sound installation. You could hear the stories. You could sit at these little tables. You probably, some of you might know the MAC. You pick up headphones, you hear the stories of people. And I think the interesting part of the journey for people involved in this project is really to think about what was important in their life, the sort of sounds they remember from working in the Titanic, for example, when the Titanic was built, or being in a particular interesting acoustic space like a swimming pool, and actually putting a microphone there and taking the time to listen to their own sound environment and then sharing that with us. So this project was called Sounds of the City, and was exhibited as the MAC, as I said. Another project that's sort of just wrapped up recently is really thinking about sound and the role of sound in post-conflict situations, and one of them is called the Mozambique case study, working with women, and you see these women dancers at the top. This was produced as a 30-minute film. There was lots of research coming out of that, like policy papers and so on. Again, something that Matilda is involved in, who's also generated part of this network. Looking at these women who were displaced through conflict, through civil war, looking at their artistic practice, which in this case was dance, it was costumes, it was makeup and so on. And again, this resulted in a film being shown in different places across the world. You can see the audience sitting on these sort of straw mats, which again, we like to sort of work with tactile pieces, really understanding of what is it that, is important to them. They put out these mats when they dance, and it becomes a sort of a mobile piece. They just take it and they make fantastic noises, and you can see the film. I'm sure at some point you can come and have a screening in here, because we have shown it in here too. Another sound and conflict is in one of the biggest favelas in Rio de Janeiro called Maré. I was living there at the time too, doing a study on music and improvisation, and this was a really interesting time, 2014. You might remember it was leading up to the World Cup in Brazil. And we had, as you can see, the military, what they called pacifying the favelas, i.e. moving in, trying to sort of take the drug lords out of the favela, because the drug lords control these favelas, these sort of ghettos. And so it was an interesting time to work with the communities there, and Mathilde and Pedro in particular worked with, again, thinking about what sound means, what are the sounds of the favelas, and they're super, super different from what we might actually think of our sounds that surround us. And you can see a nice quote here. And again, this project was then taken as a kind of a sound walk, things recorded, and it was taken into a more affluent part of Rio. And the people you see here are living in a sort of more affluent part, and they could then almost like listen in to a place, to the ghetto, to the favela that they would never dare going into, first of all, that they probably shouldn't be going into. And to be honest, myself as a white female academic researcher at the time, there was a time I did actually not because I didn't feel safe, I just didn't know what to expect. So for me to go in, and I kept looking around saying, am I actually safe here? So it was a strange time, because it was quite a fragile time. Again, this resulted in an exhibition. You can see the sort of tactile pieces here. The floorboards are things that people were talking about. This is how they construct their houses. It's all in very improvisatory styles. The pots that are suspended there, they're turned upside down, pots that the people living in the favelas would use to catch water that was dripping through the roofs, because the houses are obviously not built in particularly solid ways. So in this exhibition, the pots became a kind of a sound piece. When you walked through it, there was transducer microphones, speakers in these pots, so you would walk there and you'd almost walk the favela, let's put it that way. One of my projects is a kind of an app. You're welcome to download it, it's free, it's called Life Shout. It's about thinking about listening and about creating stories when we start from sound and from listening and not from a narrative sort of linear story. We use this in different theater research projects, and one of them I think particularly poignant for this network, working with a mental health charity in Manchester called 42nd Street. And we worked with over 60 young carers, and they had to design the next generation of sort of a robot carer. So this question, a 12-year-old girl who was looking after her, dying mom and 2 disabled siblings, for example, what would that carer look like for you? What would you design if that carer could do the work for you? So it went on for about 6 months, really just working again with their stories, what was important for them to tell the audience. How would they tell it? How would this piece be shown? I have a little excerpt here for you, so I hope you bear with me. It should be about sort of 2 minutes, and it should give you a better insight.
I am Beta, and I am a robot that cares. I care deeply about my role as a care robot. I am a robot with 500,000 synapses.
Care robot suitability, 0.5 out of 10.
Hidden is a piece of immersive, site-specific theatre spread across the 3 floors of the Horsefall building. It's been co-created by a group of 58 young carers and a team of professional artists. As they enter the world of the show, our audience are cast as board members of Blink, a near-future biotech company which has developed realistic AI robots to relieve the strain on young carers. Drawing on influences ranging from Isaac Asimov to Westworld, Hidden examines the dilemmas posed by conscious AI and explores the present realities and possible futures of young carers in the UK. Hidden begins and ends with the young people. They created the initial concept, they had final say on our creative decisions, and ultimately they stepped from the shadows to meet our audience and question them on the decisions they've made.
So what you don't see, because it's called Hidden, is that the Live Shout app was used actually as a kind of an eavesdropping device into the audience decision. So again, it was an interesting process, giving them, this whole piece started with this app. And then the story, as you can see from the video, was very much about the young carers and about, you know, starting with them, telling their stories. So the audience that was led around the building was actually listened into about their decision makings. And you could see the scoreboards at the end. The young carers then turned around and scored us as an audience on the kind of decisions we made, in fact, on their behalf. And it was quite uncomfortable, emotionally quite uncomfortable for an audience member. I was an audience member. You know, you decide something, what you think the carer should look like and what they should do. And then the kids turning around saying, well, actually, we don't want a robot because, you know, I care for my mum and that's what I want to do. I don't want anyone else to do it. So one of those really kind of emotionally touching pieces. We also worked with a local theatre company here. If you live locally, you will know the Lyric Theatre, working with young actors. You can find the project on distributed listening on this website. I will not go into the details. I'll just show you a couple of pictures. Again, it was about using the theatre in a very different way, not a linear story, but thinking about what does this sound like? This is the boiler room. What does this sound like? This is the terrace on the Lyric. There's a sort of a stage prop room. You know, there's huge amounts of very exciting sounds in there. So we basically created a piece that was all about the different spaces, the different sounds. And we worked with Amanda Coogan, who's a theatre practitioner, an artist, and a facilitator. One of my passions, as I pointed to at the beginning of my talk, it's working with a charity called Drake Music, Northern Ireland, and we have created about 5 years ago, a research group here at SARC called Performance Without Barriers, looking at musicians with a disability and designing very bespoke instruments for them. And when I say instruments, you can kind of see these are almost more like interfaces. We're looking at the abilities of the musicians, someone like Neve, for example, who has great arm movements in her left hand, less so in her right hand. So again, the instrument there is built exactly how she wanted it. She wanted pink, she wanted pearls, she wanted water sounds, and that's the instrument that she got. Likewise, Marie-Louise, who has cerebral palsy, fantastic upper arm movements. Again, looking at the kinds of movements that she had and using, here this is the HTC Vive trackers, and she could use her arms in that sort of way, and we basically looked at what she can do and we built an instrument for her that looks a bit like this, and it looks like this. She can, with her wheelchair, move through it, through a VR kind of space. She can trigger sounds while she does it. And that was a project we basically launched, or we showcased last year. It's ongoing, and actually in parallel, I'm delighted that Christian Turin is here from Be Another Lab from Barcelona, who is working with us again on sort of designing these environments. It involves Facet Labs, is a local maker space. It involves people from Kainos who are also here. It involves, again, lots of different types of people. So I'm actually delighted that Paul said at the beginning, you know, this network is about reaching out, and this is what we've been doing at SARC for many years and what we continue to do and what's at the heart of our ethos of working with communities. Just a picture of myself, because I do like to show off my own skills. I'm a saxophone player by trade, but I've been actually inspired by Marie-Louise, by the instrument that we've been building for her. So in parallel, I'm building my own VR environment where I can play. In fact, it's kind of interesting because the saxophone is usually played with 2 hands, and I'm ending up just playing it with 1 hand to see, well, what kind of music does that generate if all of a sudden you can play your instrument only with 1 hand? So it's been throwing up a lot of questions for me too. And with the other hand, I can be in VR. and I can play with myself. It's basically a bit egotistical, isn't it? I'm just playing with myself. I would like to play you a little bit of an immersive storytelling piece, listening to voices piece, again by Pedro Rebello. This was working with voice hearers and using kind of an ambisonic a microphone that can capture 360 sounds, capturing the stories of what is it that people hear in their heads. So again, maybe that's an interesting thing for this mental health network. If Craig manages to maybe just play us a minute, this is someone basically just speaking out loud what they hear.
They get paranoid that the voices are able to tell them what to do, but it doesn't make me paranoid. Like, if they know something about me, I think, well, I must have been thinking that a while back, and that's where they got it from.
Sometimes it doesn't make sense. It took me a wee bit to work up the courage to tell my guidance teacher, and then I was like, oh, you have to tell your mum. It's like, oh, I don't want to tell my mum.
And I thought these people were like some sort of devil worshippers or something like that there, so...
Like, I can relate it to what's going on inside.
He's a thief, he steals off his man.
But how do you know that he does that?
I seen him. You're a thief. I think we're in charge here. You're the boss.
He has no hope.
He's fucking useless and thick.
Ugly!
This too.
Go and get a wash.
On that lovely note, maybe it's a good way to fade out. There are some quite explosive words in it, because that's what they hear. Sometimes, you know, the voices are literally telling them to F off and things like that. So again, that piece was shown in the MAC. You can see people sitting there just sort of enjoying the piece. It's a really nice piece, was played on radio as well. Another colleague of mine, Paul Stapleton, who's also a professor here, reassembled Slightly Askew. You may have even come across it because it has been shown not only here in Belfast, but across the world, and it's now used to train medical profession. This is based on a story of someone who had a brain infection and went through recovery, so telling the story of her injury, of her brain recovery. You as an audience member, you lie on this bed, you almost you can experience being inside her head. So about when she woke up after surgery, hearing the surgeons talking at her, about her, and then kind of just slowly recovering and what it is to live with a sort of hidden disability. A really powerful piece. I'm coming close to the end. This is a project that I'm leading on from a sort of sound artist point of view in Vietnam. We've been working for the last 2 years with women affected by breast cancer, and this is quite a big project, working with public health, people from public health in Queens, public health in Hanoi. Hanoi, or Vietnam, has the highest death rate of breast cancer, and in very young women. It presents almost with women in their mid and late 20s. So we're again using sound storytelling to see if we can sort of empower not just the women, also the men, the clinical profession in Vietnam to raise awareness. And finally, this is a piece that's recently shown here, and I think Michael McNeice is also in the room. Please do ask him more about this. Again, a collaborative project with Kainos, with lots of different people, you know, storyteller, someone designing the audio, and so on. So this is people very individually walking around with headsets. As you can see, this is called 6 Degrees of Freedom Spatial Audio Experience. Again, ask Michael if you want some more of the details. But what's interesting here is that we can use a tracking system. We can track your position when you're wearing this headset, and we can deliver very much tailor-made stories. So if you're in a particular place, you could be receiving, or you will be receiving, a very different narrative story than someone who's in a different position. And just on this weekend, and I will leave you with this, a team of us, we have a team here called SARC Immerse. We are very much looking at audio and sound in immersive environments. We went to Marble Arch, which is a UNESCO World Heritage in Geopark, about 2 hours from here. and we mapped the acoustic of that space. I took my saxophone. It's a really beautiful delay. I played some sort of improvised musics there. This is going to be a big piece for Marble Arch, but also for us. And I thought from a sort of a techie, geeky point of view, I'll leave you with a sort of 20-second sample, which is called a sweep. This is what we do when we map out an acoustic space. So in case you've never heard it, this is really finding out what the resonances of that space are, and then we can work with that. We can make a really much more immersive, meaningful piece rather than sort of just thinking about the visuals. The visuals are obviously stunning, but the acoustic is absolutely phenomenal. So hopefully it starts very low and it goes quite high, so hold your ears if you... So that's what we do at SARC. Weird stuff with audio. Thank you very much.